Hello and thank you for tuning into this week's Mayor's Update. As always, we have a lot of important information to share with you here this week, so please feel free to share this video with your friends, family, relatives, and anyone else who you think might find this information helpful over the course of the coming week. We've got a couple different things to talk about this week. A lot of them are related to the city clerk's office, and then just a couple other heads up of some of the other projects that are going on in the city in responses to some of the questions my office has been receiving phone calls about. We're going to start with the spray park over at the Greenwood Memorial Pool. A couple people have been asking why this has been closed for the past couple years. Now, this is something that the splash park has been around for 7 years now in Gardner. Hard to believe that it's already been that long. A couple years ago, we had some issues where, since the spray park is put in a place where there is just simply high groundwater, where it's proximity to Crystal Lake, a couple years ago we had some issues where the groundwater was actually infiltrating into the storage box that had the clean filtered water that was going out through the machines there too. So we had to stop the use of the spray park there to make sure that we were only using the cleaned water in the system there, and it wasn't groundwater coming up through the storage tank. That was repaired, and then the COVID-19 pandemic happened. Now, actually, outdoor spray parks were one of the last things to open in phase 4 of the COVID-19 reopening, in terms of you could use them, but you needed to have a mask on. Now, wearing a cloth mask or a surgical mask on a child's face and then spraying water in their face led to several issues. So we just decided to forego having the spray park going at those times so that we wouldn't run into issues of any, children having any issues of not being able to breathe the right way because the mask was on as you were spraying water in their face. So because that's what DPH, the Massachusetts Department of Public Health, required of us to do during that time period, we just chose not to run the spray park during that time. Now the issue that we're running into there is one repair that still needs to be made. There's a pipe underground that did burst in the winter time, just because, again, the high groundwater that's in that area and the ground freezing during the winter time caused that pipe to snap. So we are going to be fixing that shortly. And the last issue is that because the spray park is located on the deep end side of the Greenwood Memorial Pool, we are required to have an additional staff member there, like a lifeguard, to make sure that no children are running from the spray park into the deep end of the pool, causing any safety issues there. So state regulations, per the Department of Public Health, again, to require us that if we do run it, we have to have an extra staff member there. And just like every other place that's running statewide, we do have some staffing issues in terms of getting lifeguards there. That's why places like Fitchburg and Leominster actually have several of their pools closed this summer and are running their pools on a very limited basis. We are lucky enough to have a steady lifeguard staff for the pool itself, but not the additional staff we'd need in order to run the spray park. So hopefully we'll be able to fix all of those shortly. But to answer the questions as to why it wasn't running this year, that's the response, as to just to get all the correct information out there, because there was a lot of misinformation going around from what we're hearing from some of the phone calls we've received. The city clerk's office has asked that we give an update here regarding dog licenses. Some people may have received delinquent dog license notices in the mail recently from the city clerk's office. A lot of the confusion that's out there relates to the ordinance that was recently passed by the city council that made it so that if you were over 70 years old, you did not have to pay to register your dog. However, like we said in these updates around the time that was happening, and in the different press releases and news notifications that were put out about that, even though you were not required to pay to register your dog, the registration form still legally had to be filled out, as state law does not allow cities and towns to waive that requirement. So the late notices that went out there are for those who chose not to register their dogs. Now that could be people who were under 70 or over than 70. Like I said, if you were under 70, you still are required to pay the about $10 to register your dog. If you were over 70, you had to fill out the form, but you just didn't pay. The late fees, however, we are also not allowed by state law to waive those. So the city clerk's office is handling all of those there, but if there were any confusions in that matter, that's the answer that the city clerk's office has asked that we relay in this video, just to try to alleviate any of the confusion in that way. The other thing that the city clerk's office asked me to let you all know about is information regarding the new Votes Act that was signed by Governor Baker last week and passed by the state legislature. Now, this has several different components that affect us here in Gardner, and they all impact state and federal elections, so not city elections. The first thing that this new law does is require every city and town to offer permanent mail-in voting options in every state and federal election, not just absentee voting. Now, we saw this over the course of the pandemic, the special election that I got elected in, and every election that we've had since then, where you can get a mail-in voting application, fill that out, and the city clerk's office will mail you a ballot. Now, where this comes a little confusing because of the way the state law was written, both the city clerk's office and the state's Secretary of State's office are required to send every individual a mail-in voting ballot application. So you may be receiving a card like this from the Secretary of State's office elections division, where it asks you to fill out your information and request if you want a mail-in ballot for all elections this year, just the primary, just the general election, and what party you are. That way you can fill that out for the primary election. At the same time, they are requiring the city clerk's office to send out this same application, asking the same questions on our own end. Both of those go back to our city clerk's office, and your ballots are processed. In the end, you only receive one ballot, and you only vote once. But some people have filled out this application and then received this application in the mail and been confused as to which one is the correct one to send in. And that's okay, because again, in the end, all of these are processed through our city clerk's office, and you will only receive one ballot. But no, if you filled out one, you don't need to fill out the other, because you're all set and it's the same information going to the same place. The other thing that this new law requires us to have is early in-person voting for a minimum of 2 weeks. In the primary election, it's required to be during normal city hall business hours. At the general election, it's required to have an additional time on the weekends of at least 6 hours. So there'll be a lot more voting information that's going to be coming out when we get closer to the state primary in early September and the general election in November, as to what the different voting options are, how you can vote, all these different things here. But just know, in the end, only one ballot is counted. The state law specifically says that in-person voting ranks this compared to early voting, that by mail ranks compared to this to absentee voting. So even if there is some confusion out there, just know that it still is only one ballot that is counted per person, because everything is tracked to see, who turned in a ballot here. Was it an early vote? Was it a mail-in vote? Was it this? Was it that? And so even if you went to the polls, all of that information is already calculated next to your name there too. So if you have any questions when any of this information does get released, please feel free to contact my office at any time, and we'll get all that information out to you too. My office did notify the City Council as part of their information in their packet for their upcoming meeting. Same thing with the Finance Committee this past week, so that the public would be able to access the summary sheet provided by the Secretary of State's office, because it is a several-page summary sheet explaining what the different requirements are as a result of this new law that was passed and signed by the governor. The Junior Police Academy has been going quite strong over at the Gardner Police Department. The class is full again this year, and in its first week, they've been doing a lot of work with, thank you very much to Fitness Concepts and CrossFit for really working with those there. Lieutenant Maroney and all the different instructors at the Gardner Police Department, Officer Ferrara, Officer Latteroot, Officer Spain, Officer Lawrence, there's a lot of people who are there and just getting involved, Officer Willis, with helping these students have a enjoyable experience as part of the Junior Police Academy curriculum. This is something that it's in its very early years doing here at the Gardner Police Department, but it's a very, very successful program. So if you're looking for any information on that, check out the Gardner Police Department's social media websites, and you can see the different activities that they're doing there. And I'm looking forward to seeing how these students progress between this past week and then again when we see them at their graduation and all the work that they're going to be doing in between. The state notified the city last week that we will be receiving a $400,000 grant from the Massachusetts Department of Transportation's Complete Streets program that'll go towards work at the North Central Pathway bike trail. Now, some of you may remember, I think just 2 weeks ago, we announced that we received a Mass Trails grant for a different section of the bike path. That is for the design of Phase 2. What Phase 1 of the bike path extension goes from the skating rink down up on Park Street by Monument Park, and then down behind the Greenwood Pool and up along the water's edge around Crystal Lake Cemetery. Phase 2 of that, which is what the design portion that we received the funding for from the Mass Trails Grant, will go past the cemetery near the new substation and then up around behind the golf course and then through the woods by Route 140 to connect there by the Pearly Brook pathway. Now, the money that we're receiving, this $400,000, is construction funds so that we can actually go through and build that Phase 1 connection to connect the Crystal Lake Cemetery to the Gardner Veterans Memorial Skating Rink. The design portion will then take it from Crystal Lake Cemetery out to Route 140 for Phase 2. So thank you very much to Ms. Lindsay Butler and Director Trevor Beauregard, both from the Community Development and Planning Department that we have here in the City Hall, for really securing those funds for us to be able to do that work here in the City of Gardner and expand what we can offer in that section of the city. The search committee for the new police chief will be having their first meeting next week. Now, this is an ad hoc advisory committee, so this is not one that has a posted meeting, but it's just one to review the applicants that are there, decide who to interview, have the first round of interviews, and then they will send me their top 2 choices for final consideration. I will then do a second round of interviews with those candidates, and then from there send up an appointee to the City Council. What we'll do first is do what's called a 60-day temporary appointment so that that person can have 2 months of a probationary period, just like we do with every other city employee that we have in any city position. And then after that, they'll go to the City Council. The City Council's Appointments Committee will then have the chance to ask questions of that appointee and to vet that candidate and then make a recommendation to the City Council as to whether or not to confirm that appointee. How this works is with any other appointment that comes up from my office that's subject to City Council confirmation, if the council confirms it, they're good for the full 3 years that they're in there. If for some reason the council does not confirm that appointee then just becomes a employee at will. So they do maintain their position. However, they don't have that 3-year protection as if they got the full appointment confirmed by the City Council. So that's how that process works. But again, we're just at the first stage of vetting the resumes that we received, and the search committee will take care of that. We actually received, I know I said last week we received 10. I was wrong because there were 2 that came in just before the deadline. So we have 12 applicants, and they're from about 4 different states. We've got someone from Colorado, someone from Montana, someone from California, someone from Maine, and then the rest from Massachusetts. And several different places across the Commonwealth too, Boston and several other, between Boston and the Berkshires, we've got several applicants from here. So it really should be something that we really do get the best fit for this department that we have here and the goals that we're hoping to achieve with the City of Gardner. So thank you very much to the members of the search committee who have stepped up and volunteered their time to begin that process. And I'm looking forward to seeing how they proceed forward and what 2 finalists I get placed on my desk for final consideration. Lastly, we do want to talk about the upcoming National Night Out that'll take place on Tuesday, August 2nd at 5:30 p.m. at Gardner High School. This is a different location that we have had before. Before, we've always had this event at Monument Park in downtown. There will be buses that we've secured to help transport people to Gardner High School, but I want to thank Veronica Patty, our prevention coordinator in our health department, who has really stepped up to organize and communicate between the different organizations that run this event every year, the Gardner Community Action Team, the police department, the fire department, the several different agencies that are involved in this really city event that we're having here. That again will take place on Tuesday, August 2nd at 5:30 p.m. However, that concludes this week's Mayor's Update. As always, if you have any questions on anything that was brought up in these updates, you can contact my office at any time, and I look forward to speaking with you soon. Stay cool out there and enjoy what we have in the city. Take care.